Our next speaker is Jenny Clegg. She also doesn't need presentation, but I'm going to do one anyway. She's an author, peace activist, long-standing China specialist. She's an independent writer and researcher specializing in China's development and international role, and a former senior lecturer course leader in Asia Pacific Studies at the University of Central Lancashire, Preston in the UK. Her works include China's Global Strategy Towards a Multipolar World, Pluto Press 2009. Dr. Clegg regularly writes substantial analysis about China-related developments. Before I give the floor to her, as it was coming in, I discovered the latest book that she's done, which is this one, Storming the Heavens. Everybody should buy one of these copies. They are outside available, and you will be much wiser about China than you were before you read this book. Thank you very much. Welcome, Jenny.
Thank you for that introduction, Francisco. I'm very pleased to be here this afternoon on this panel. These days, I feel as if I'm in a really bad dream. This dream is full of F-35s and B-61 gravity bombs and AUKUS submarines, and the US has got a Department of War, and Britain will defend Taiwan, sending warships up the Taiwan Straits to prove its point, and Germany and Japan are reviving their military alliance of the past, and Britain is helping. I mean, is this for real? Is this serious? Am I dreaming? In May, I visited China. I visited the city of Chongqing, which is a truly awesome city of 30 million people. Along the banks of the Yangtze, the river Yangtze, there are high-rise buildings as far as the eye can see. It's becoming a hub in the high-quality productive forces, building EVs and robotics. It's always been a sort of centre point for southwestern China, linking with the east coast down the Yangtze. But now there are high-speed rail links go all the way down into Indochina, reaching into link into Southeast Asia. And then they go up through Kazakhstan and across Russia all the way to Europe. And they're now building a middle spur, which is going to reach across into the Middle East. So you see this, and China's future is palpable. You come back here, and what have we got? Nuclear annihilation? So when did this nightmare become separated from reality? I'd say around 1945, 1946, when the US, with Britain, fabricated the myth that they and they alone had saved the world from fascism. But it was China that at huge cost had resisted Japanese aggression for 14 years, and much of that time they did so without any help from the United States, without any help from the UK. They held down Japanese forces in China, and that constrained them from spilling over and making the fighting in the Pacific even more intense. It would have been much more difficult to win the war had the Chinese not done that. And also preventing the opening up of the Second Front against the Soviet Union. If that had happened, goodness knows where we'd be now. So when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor and Hong Kong in 1941, Roosevelt and Churchill had to recognize China's contribution. And so China became our ally in the war, and also became a founder member of the United Nations along the principles of equality of nations. But this transformative moment in the recognition of the equality of nations was not to be. After the war, the imperialist system was under challenge because, at least in Asia, world war had been a fight for liberation. And as the defeat of fascism gave way to surging movements of national independence, European colonial rule was crumbling. So imperialism had to restructure, and it had to restructure around a more indirect system of neocolonialism, with the US dominating the international space. it's really this myth of the World War victory was born in a virulent anti-communism and became the cornerstone of the US claim to world leadership, simultaneously cutting China out and sidelining the UN. Since 1949, China has worked to restore those 1945 principles of equality, both in terms of itself and in terms of the wider world, but also addressing the weakness of the foundation of the UN, which was, of course, the economic inequality and the imbalance between nations. It took China 20 years to gain UN recognition, 30 years to regain US recognition, albeit with caveats over Taiwan, over 40 years to establish diplomatic relations with all but a handful of countries. Then, from the 1990s, China began to build bilateral win-win partnerships, as well as forming regional groups such as the China-Africa Forum, the Forum with Latin American and Caribbean states, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and around 2010, China initiated the Belt and Road Initiative and helped to draw together the BRICS to further the agenda of economic rebalancing. Then in 2017, you might remember, Xi Jinping took the first step onto the world stage, choosing to appear at the Davos Forum, the premier gathering of political and big business leaders. And to this international capitalist class, Xi Jinping said effectively, yes, China is here now, and we're going to take a lead. And he proceeded to disconcert them with his call for a win-win globalization, building a shared future. Then came the series of initiatives, which I think other speakers have already mentioned, on global development, global security, civilization exchange, and just now, as Keith was talking about, the Shanghai Cooperative Organization Summit, in which Xi Jinping introduced the Global Governance Initiative. So on reflection over this period, we can see China building a new multilateralism step by step, a new system of international relations amongst equal states. The basis lies in uniting the global south, but this is not easy, given their different histories, political systems, levels of development, and so China creates these various forums and initiatives. So some countries can work together on development, some on security issues, some on regional cooperation, and so on. The Global Governance Initiative gives a new focus for all of these arrangements, all to come together in an overarching system. And we should be clear that China has never set out to build a socialist bloc. Bloc building for China is dangerously divisive. It has always sought to build unity, as in United Nations. Now, critics claim, for example, that the BRICS members all pull in different directions and can't achieve anything. But that is to miss the point, which is to develop a new way of doing things amongst equal states, committing to resolving tensions arising from differences through dialogue. And if countries commit to that, that means the end of war. Critics also mock China's initiatives as too vague to be meaningful. Take this recent Shanghai Cooperation Summit, which has seen to shift from a security focus, as Keith was explaining. It was aimed originally to counter terrorism in Central Asia, then bringing in others, notably Pakistan and India, but it's now widened to an economic agenda with the proposal for a development bank with the potential over time to reduce reliance on the dollar. Now, critics minimise the significance given the lack of specifics here. But let's consider how the summit included 7 out of 10 members of ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. And from the Middle East and West Asia, it drew in Egypt and Turkey. Now factor in what I said about Chongqing and all of those linkages in the Eurasian area, and the commitment to high tech, and add the summit aspirations to promote development in digitization and green development. And we see that even if the plans are vague, Here is a material basis of a future world. Now, when I talk about the need to rebuild the UN these days, I get very funny looks from people. As if to say, don't I know the UN is a corpse in a state of serious decomposition. But I would contend that this building of multilateralism, step by step, as I've outlined, in this process lie the fruits of the real World War II victory, working through the decades towards a world without war. But just as China steps onto the world stage seeking some stability, it is charged with leading an axis of disruption. From the ignorance of Kaja Kallas, would you believe the EU foreign minister who was surprised that Russia and China should talk between them about winning World War II and defeating fascism? With her ignorance on the one hand, Starmer's effort to revive gunboat diplomacy, Trump's swagger, the reckless bombings of Iran and Qatar, all of these spawning, encouraging the worst forces of reaction, both domestically and internationally. These are clear signs of how great a danger we are in. And China could not be plainer. We have to think about our shared future, it is saying, because of what history tells us about our catastrophic shared past. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Clegg, Jenny. As you can see from the explanations, peace has a huge, gigantic anti-imperialist potential. The United States is completely the enemy of peace now. It's not only because it sells weapons when there is war, but it's much more than that. It tried to stop economic processes that are going on. We know now that China is the main trading partner of over 150 countries. And it is through these institutions where countries can actually participate as equals, which is the key point. Participate as equals in order to engage in collaboration and cooperation that will benefit their own society. One thing I want to say regarding this, particularly the 80th anniversary of the defeat of fascism in China, the level of sophistication, military sophistication and political sophistication of the Chinese Communist Party in fighting Japanese when they were invading their country is absolutely superb. How can you maintain national unity when you actually put together landowners, peasants, and everybody else against the Japanese? If you squeeze the landowners too hard, they go onto the Japanese side. If you don't squeeze them sufficiently, the peasants will abandon you. So to be able to liberate the zones in the rear guard of the Japanese invasion for years, building everything and making the life very difficult for the Japanese and actually helping the fight against fascism was absolutely essential. So the role of the Communist Party was central not only to defeat the Japanese, but also to build the new China that we know.